luckily in the same supply chain procurement domain, which has been very interesting since it has evolved from the time that I joined. Three big companies in UAE gave me a great platform, and the learning continues as we see. I'm here for another session to explore and find synergies around something that will come from your side, some perspectives that I've got, and probably we will draw some common areas of interest and then start adopting and applying them. That's been the course all throughout. So just to summarize, I've worked for Emirates Airlines, I've worked for Amiras Engineers Office, which was entrusted to do a lot of luxury real estate and FM related work. And for the last 12 years, I've been with the Dubai World Trade Center, a very exciting prospect again with exhibitions, events, all sorts of exposure that you can think of in a procurement space. So yes, that's where I am right now, and you exactly
Yeah.
find me in my chair, which is my workstation in my trade center office.
Very cool workstation. Absolutely. Well, thank you for that introduction. And thank you to the audience for joining us today. I'm Kyler Cheatham, your host for Bite Size. And I'm really excited to have our guest today to talk about procurement. So, just a few logistics before we jump into that great introduction and have this conversation. So, wherever you're streaming today, we can hear and see your questions. So, you can go ahead and pop them in the comments, and we'll go ahead and get back to them. We will tag our guests and all kinds of different people in the comments to kind of engage in that conversation. The mission of Bite Size is to make sure that we open up this transparency around technology. Specifically today, we're kind of digging into procurement, which a lot of people think procurement isn't that exciting, but I think it's an incredibly exciting industry and definitely something that I'm excited to get your feedback around kind of the next generation of worker in this conversation. So you did such a great intro there. And so let's kind of jump into what your thoughts are on kind of the evolution of procurement. It's known traditionally, stereotypically, to be a very manual process that sometimes is kind of honestly painful, right? But there's been so many transformations when it comes to technology or organizations as far as different infrastructure around procurement. I'm wondering if you can kind of just give us a lay of the land of kind of what you're seeing in the industry, maybe some highlights that you're excited about in 2025 or in the next coming months when it comes to procurement technology.
I think it's a great perspective. And when you said it pains to work with procurement, that's been a sentiment that we have been hearing a lot from a lot of business units. And I think when we talk about how it evolved into something which can be a value driver, I think COVID was a great example, especially when there was a huge disruption and
Mhm.
when the industry started opening up. A lot of focus and attention went back to procurement because there were things to be fast tracked on supply chain areas. There were things to be negotiated back
Mhm.
on AMCs. There was technology available to deal with the pandemic effects as well. That's where when businesses started looking at renegotiations, they headed back to procurement. So
Mhm.
something that they had foreseen always as them holding the budget and driving it forward, it brought them to a point that this support function, which has been a pain to work with, can
Mhm.
actually work for us by bridging that level of relationship with the external stakeholders that either can we get things faster now that we're
Mhm.
opening up after COVID, or can we extend our support contracts
Mhm.
to provision for that lost time and lost business.
Mhm.
That's where procurement kind of got that understanding and
Mhm.
importance that we're not just here running a process, which becomes
Mhm.
painful at the end. We are actually here to understand from them their current commercial slash productivity pain and bring some solutions on the table. So I think I see 2020, late 2020, 2021 as a game-changing year for procurement.
Mhm.
And then it continued with the influx of technology as well. So the more we think of value, we need to also think of changing our mindsets as well. And that's
Mhm.
what would lead to people changing their mindsets about us.
Mhm. Absolutely. And I think that is such a healthy way of looking at areas across the organization that might be a pain point is, instead of looking at it as like, oh, something I have to do, is looking at as an opportunity in order to transform and be more efficient. Like you mentioned, we were kind of went through this forced transformation in COVID as, a global business community. But what we didn't realize is that a lot of those efficiencies had always been there, but we hadn't taken the time to really look at them. So I'm so interested in AI and automation in procurement. And I wonder, from a procurement expert, how helpful is that? Because I think a lot of times what we talk about in the marketplace, and this is kind of the narrative around AI just in general, it's kind of this silver bullet solution, right? We are going to go in, we're going to take all the manual kind of sorting around looking at vendors or looking at suppliers, looking at pricing, finding that diversity in procurement. But a lot of times, I think we forget that we still very much need that human intelligence and strategic thinking around AI and procurement. So I wonder, as someone who's in the industry, what your thoughts are around that.
I think the one area that you rightly mentioned, the procurement has been a PR agency with very vague branding around it. They've never really projected themselves as someone who can actually bring value where even the business unit is not thinking beyond a certain solution, product, or value in terms of the budgets that they consume. When it comes to technology, before we even head into technology, let's think of what exactly we carry out as a function, and it's decision making around spending money with whom and how. And that's your process bet as well. Now, if you park technology around it and you see your own pain point on why do you become a pain by time lapses for the business, there is a lot of opportunity to pass on things to technology where you will have agility, clarity, and accuracy of
Mm-hmm.
things that you will pull out of that. Once you've got that, your decision making will definitely improve. And your decision making, summarized in front of your business units or your end users, will actually make you valued and respected more because now you're backed by technology. You've actually covered the time lapse by the
Mm-hmm.
efficiency that technology brings. And I think it's all about knowing your key areas of value that you need to interact directly with, or
Mm-hmm.
probably back yourself with the tool. Think
Mm-hmm.
about a process that runs a conventional tender that used to be about 3 months of work. Now the way world works, you might not have a vendor holding prices for you for 3 months, which means that your process has to be streamlined in a way through technological inputs that you can get past all these little steps within a span of a week. Because
Mm-hmm.
more focus is needed on getting things across from one place to the other, rather than worrying about the process, which historically has been a very long process because that's how the steps were built. Now, even if you've
Mm-hmm.
mapped an ERP system, that was just accounting for the time that you have stated there. So there's nothing
Mm-hmm.
that ERP can do there. So if you take those processes out, and you mentioned how would you find vendors or the right database to work with
Mm-hmm.
for such categories of spend? I think that's where technology would go beyond your own intelligence because it would actually bring and pull up data that becomes your decision making points, who's in and who's not in. So I think understanding what you're delivering, what you're basically around in terms of your category slash market dynamics, the use of technology is imperative. I think if you remain a great procurement professional without leveraging technology, that's where technology would start pinching you, and you might not become or remain relevant. But the moment
Mm-hmm.
you don't compete with technology, you rather complete yourself with technology, your
Mm-hmm.
output would completely change. And that's where you'll be heard better by your end users, and your stakeholder engagement backed by your technological inputs on accuracy and agility of things will make you stand a better chance in getting your value proposition across the table.
Mm-hmm. I love how you say that. I love how you look at procurement as servicing the customers within the business. So seeing other areas that you're purchasing for or other areas that you're supporting as your actual customers. So you can really kind of have that discovery, hear their needs, and really listen to them. I think back to a recent conversation we had with one of our clients, an agile IT team infrastructure, and they did very much the same. They had a service base when it came to their IT users. And if you want to hear that conversation, I'll link it below. But this is very similar, that mindset of let's listen to what we need as far as an organization before we kind of get all worked up about new technologies that we're going to implement in the business. So you mentioned ERP, so obviously I got to talk about it. So when we go into an ERP implementation, tell us how important procurement requirements are in the consideration process of either implementation or software selection for an ERP system.
I think the quality of data matters a lot for any organization, especially when you talk about a procurement module. Eventually, you have to be very efficient with your spend management strategies, and those strategies can be built around the spend visibility, around what data is actually held in your system. If you've got a coding system which is accurate and which actually gives you visibility, you're in a great position to make use of the ERP. I think ERP are powerful tools. All they need is the right data, the right segmentation and allocations to then have the visibility that makes you be prepared for the strategic inputs you need for your key and critical spend categories. So without naming a specific application, I think the functionalities are very powerful, but it all goes down to what level of ownership a procurement leader takes when he actually starts creating a blueprint of the module that he's going to use. The output is going to be how he defines all the steps. Now, if his process is long, but he can leverage that ERP technology to shorten that, it's all about understanding how it would be done. You can't just expect an IT consultant to do that. And I always say we rely or link technology to IT, but it's the business function that has to be delivered in a way. So I think that sort of mastery is an absolute must for that procurement leader to understand the finish line. We even take students on board for their PG dissertations and all. And I always reiterate one thing, that please start your project with a finish line in mind. Because eventually supply chain solutions would give you many outcomes. But you need to be very clear about where were you heading in the beginning so that you've got an end point in mind and then the relevant steps. So I think any ERP, but the procurement lead having the business and market understanding at the same time. I've seen, trust me, I've seen a sink mixer requested, which is probably sanitary, and it ended up becoming a zinc mixer, which went to the chemicals category just because of one alphabet, because you left a free text field for writing your request. So that sort of data, ERP can't really sort that problem out for you. So a business understanding and a little bit of that acumen, which allows you to have a long-term vision about system, because the system is there to facilitate, to take that pain out, because our branding has always been they're pain to work with because they take a lot of time. Their processes are so bureaucratic that way that it's not going to end. The process is not going to end. Our budget will go. Our project timelines will fall over. So I think that's an opportunity again. And I always put stress on the fact, take your time, set your blueprint in a manner that you have to run it with those test environments again and again to make sure before you go live, you've addressed 80% of the things in the right manner, or at least they're flowing in the right way so that there is absolutely no disruption. And always remember, there's a team that's going to work with that interface, right? You leave a pain for their day-to-day work, you're not really helping your own team as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So well said. So well said. Really that business focus, not only that, but that collaborative focus. A lot of times, when we're doing these types of workshops for any new technology, you're sitting across from someone in the organization that you've never really taken the time to consider their experience or what they've done before. And I think those are some of my favorite pieces of implementation, because we're able to say, oh, that's why you want that certain functionality, or this is your experience when it comes to utilizing, especially in procurement, because nobody understands how to do procurement but procurement, right? So I mean, speaking of that, I know you gave us that awesome intro in the beginning, but you have this great thought leadership around kind of the next generation of procurement careers and bringing that workforce and growing and evolving that workforce, which I absolutely love. Because again, I feel like it's not something that you come out of school and you're like, oh, I'm definitely going to go into procurement. So I'm wondering if you can give us a little background of why you chose that career path ultimately, and then kind of talk about what the opportunities are out there for maybe the younger workforce or anyone transitioning to a new position.
Yes, absolutely. In terms of becoming an accidental buying professional, that's probably 95% of the case around the globe.
Yeah.
I was not in those 95% segment or in that segment that way. I would definitely look at the pride we take in spending companies'
Mm-hmm.
money and we get paid for that. I think that's an absolute thing of pride where you're actually paid, and then the company tells you, now here's the fund, please go and spend it responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
That's motivation. The next gen, I would say, needs to be motivated on the holistic side of things in procurement. Now, it's not a support function. It accounts for external, internal stakeholders. It allows you to build in that market intelligence within your decisions. So there's no area of business that you as procurement professional will not touch. Uh, and that's where the exposure that you get as procurement and most of my uh, I would say mentoring to the new or the next layer or the next gen would be start with sales, as in learn how to sell, because that skill is more needed than anything when it comes
Mm-hmm.
to adopting buying as a profession. Trust me, we deal with sellers all the time, and we need to understand how do they see us, because all your BATNAs and ZOPAs and all your negotiations, you'll probably have a very clear mindset. How do they actually work around strategies while they're trying to sell something to a buying professional? So before you
Mm-hmm.
become a buyer, start understanding sales, because all the change management elements as well, all the ideas, propositions you would sell across the organization, and that's the holistic side of it. You'll have to be a very good salesperson for an end user to come and change specs because you're convincing him based on any facts you've gathered, and you're actually making him believe that you're helping him. And that's that person who's been moaning about you being a pain. Now you're actually becoming very logical about something that you want to sell. So your selling skills also defines your future in procurement. So when you
Mm-hmm.
actually sell that element, the holistic side, the dynamics around the market, spending money, being able to go and meet people and
Mm-hmm.
influence them rather than convince them. And
Mm-hmm.
influence is always by logic and by what you have as intelligence. It builds a portfolio or a profile within yourself that you'll start enjoying. You will start enjoying your own self in that role because you would say, I take decisions on behalf of the company after I've done all this. And when you look around, no other section or profession around you within that organization's hierarchy would have that luxury of going into
Mm-hmm.
so many segments of business. So I think that's been a great tool. I see CIPS, which is one of the big institutes,
Mm-hmm.
promoting procurement as a profession. They do a lot with the next layer of professionals by giving them those academics and use case or case studies.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, an interesting one would be I always use that with the next layer. How do you buy fireworks? Do you even understand 30 seconds of nice to see stuff costing X million of dollars and all
Uh-huh.
that? Can you break it down into how we actually reached that sort of an amount for 30 seconds of viewing? And trust
Uh-huh.
me, 31st December, midnight, everyone is there. And 1st Jan, even if I offer you free of charge, these same fireworks, no one would turn up to watch that. You see, that sort of example makes them think it's a very interesting thing. It's not very centered to one type of work.
Right. Right. And that, I mean, that's so cool. The diversity too of having that skill set. So you could go from selling fireworks, right, to selling medical device equipment or to selling, certain metals and chemical processes and things like that. So it's, those skills are very transferable across many different industries. I love how you approach it as an opportunity to influence that perception of procurement as opposed to kind of be, as I call it, Captain No, right? We can't do that. We're not buying that. We're not doing this. And a lot of times that's what procurement can get a bad rap of doing, is being the bottleneck or being the issue, if you will. And a lot of times that's just certainly not the case. They have a higher set of standards that they need to meet within the organization, because they're responsible for so much budget and that spending around that. I also love, and I think you should do this if you are a procurement specialist or even anyone in the technology community, do a 30-second video to see if you can explain what you do, right, in that amount of time, and send it to people. I do this a lot with our clients that are coming up with new evolutions in the space, right? When they're coming up with new digital twin, type of equipment, I need them to explain it to me in 30 seconds, or their executive team is not going to buy it. Their customer is not going to buy it. Their internal team is not going to buy it, because we need to be able to influence that community, whether we're talking to external customers or internal teammates. And that perception is so, so powerful. And I assume that really translates a lot within your leadership journey in being kind of a main pillar of how you lead in procurement.
I think you've nailed it in the right way. And you mentioned healthcare, and I would want to pick that for one of those
Yeah.
examples that with time you start learning about moving from fireworks to healthcare, and a very modern day concept, just in time, Toyota, whatever you link it to. It's a great concept for supply chain, less holding costs, more efficiency
Mm-hmm.
production. Think about healthcare and just in time. Probably not the concept you would want your patients to be on the line and then the
Mm-hmm.
medicine suppliers are coming through. You see, within the category expertise, you start challenging concepts that probably are working well in a category, but you
Mm-hmm.
become a leader within your own category. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
you actually act as a CEO within your category, right? When you're assigned a category, you're actually taking decisions based on what all you know about this category internally and externally. That is something which makes you such a well-rounded professional. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why good negotiators are businessmen, because they actually, from category managers, become those business leaders who are actually running a P&L around it, around their category, because eventually it has to blend well with the organization's bottom line
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the year. So when you shape your personality into this sort of model, which people see is not just about numbers. It's not just about, I've been doing it for a while, so I'm probably right most of the time. It's just that you've got so much logic. And when it comes to technology, that logic is further strengthened because now you've got data backing you. So how would someone not say yes to you because you've got facts in your hand? And I'll give you a very interesting example I came across
Mm-hmm.
through one interaction with someone who was very good with the SRM side, supplier relationship management. Half of your procurement from tendering has moved into SRM or strategic sourcing or strategic partnerships. Think about a great relationship that you protect all throughout your procurement journey, uh, and you become comfortable dealing with that company, and it's probably co-creation of value at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine in terms of a business direction for both companies, very ethical as well, and you would probably regularize it in a way that it continues, and especially in sectors like oil and gas, aerospace, and all that. You
Mm-hmm.
you need to do that because you can't just be away from the vendor. But think about now data. There are some uncomfortable conversations. Parties would have that sort of a
Mm-hmm.
relationship where, however, you want to protect the relationship. Think about a rating agency coming into the picture and reflecting on some areas that your vendor probably needs to improve. That's not a comfortable conversation for you directly. You see, how would you actually leverage technology to do that for you while you protect the relationship, yet the message goes across? And I think if
Mm-hmm.
people understand this technology, you're not really blaming them. You're not really being very direct with a negative or
Mm-hmm.
a concern. Yet technology blended into the relationship, giving them insights. It's now up to them and how much they want to protect the relationship at the
Mm-hmm.
same time. So you see, if you and why we talk about rating agencies, because they go beyond the normal means of surveys and
Mm-hmm.
questions and all. They pull information from all over the world, be it financial health, be it ethics within the supply chain, be it their welfare standards at their end, how are they shaping themselves up to embrace sustainability in the next 5 years? I think that's a very important question. You've got RFPs floating all over the world, but you need to also ask if you've got a 10-year program, everyone has got a 2030 vision to sustainability. Are we asking that? Are you having a vision as a vendor? So I need to blend your vision or kind of place it against mine
Mm-hmm.
because I need to be as good as my supply chain at the end, or I would be
Mm-hmm.
eventually as good as my team and as good as my supply chain. So if you're not going to have aggressive plans towards sustainability, I can straight away see 5, 7 years, you're probably not going to be my partner.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where technology would foresee things about or guide you towards those sort of market segments where you can have long-term plans. Because all of us know sustainability comes at a cost. How would you
Mm-hmm.
allocate that cost between the right partners to have that co-destiny achieved at the end?
So, how can you embrace sustainability in the next 5 years?
Because you have to make your procurement inherently become sustainable. It's like you're not really asking them questions, you're creating specs from the onset of going into projects with the mindset that this has to be green. Now, the cost side of it is a discussion that comes at a later stage. But if you start at a wrong note, being non-sustainable and trying to blend sustainability later on through your evaluations or bringing vendors, why not create something which is inherently sustainable? The other thing is, we all know how borrowing rates are very different for high scoring ESG companies. We
Mm-hmm.
have got projects, they'll pay for your sustainability because your borrowing rate percentage going down is
Mm-hmm.
actually funding that sustainability project. So
Mm-hmm.
when I say being holistic, being that leadership element, you need to really sell this. You need to sell this to your supply chain. You probably find it expensive, but do you actually find it expensive if you see yourself 5 years down the road not having enough customers because customers
Mm-hmm.
would probably rate you on
Mm-hmm.
retention based on how green you are. So
Mm-hmm.
can you afford that? So there
Mm-hmm.
is customer retention as well linked to it. So your
Mm-hmm.
revenues are actually linked there. So the cost
Mm-hmm.
or the upfront cost eventually gets offset against the revenue, and eventually market demand will pick up.
Mm-hmm.
So the costs will come down, and that's the cycle we have seen all throughout. Uh, a no plastic or a recyclable element or a reuse or reduce, all these 3 R's or 4 R's you blend into your procurement strategies, they'll there won't be a category where you'll say, I don't have a vendor, because there is a business potential to those categories as well. So we
Mm-hmm.
need to also understand the dynamics on how suppliers see, because they need to also grow with us. So one area of growth would be a common objective. If you
Mm-hmm.
can tag a customer or a big customer
Mm-hmm.
where their objectivity is built around sustainability or 20% increase on sustainability every year, let's
Mm-hmm.
tag or tap that vendor or tap that customer early, because
Mm-hmm.
before they go anywhere, let's get linked to them. So
Mm-hmm.
these are smart investments into relationships.
Mm-hmm.
They might look difficult on cost, on adoption, on
Mm-hmm.
timelines. We can't turn
Mm-hmm.
green tomorrow, 100%. We won't have net
Yeah.
zero by 2030, but
Mm-hmm.
the journey has to start. And the earlier, the better for all.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much, I mean, that to me is really an investment, right, into your overall supply chain for resiliency. And a lot of times we see global compliance. I mean, the maritime industry comes to mind when I think of that because we've got ports here in the States that are, going to be carbon neutral by 2030, and they have over, a lot of global trade that come through that will not be, net zero by that amount of time. So they need to go to different ports throughout the United States that don't have the same compliance. So there's so many different ways, and that's only going to continue to get more complex. So investing in that infrastructure, at least setting the stage as you're recommending, right? Like at least having the conversation, looking at where we can invest smartly and wisely in our supply chain to become more sustainable and resilient in the future. And that's not, just for green technology. That's for looking at new innovations and efficiencies and all of those different pieces because you're able to have that discovery conversation as a team without, becoming defensive or, getting siloed or having any sort of resistance to change. It's seen as more of an innovation or incubation process within the organization as well. So I think that's such an amazing way to look at it. So I'm curious to think about in 2025, what are you recommending kind of top line organizations do with their procurement process? Like if they're sitting down for strategies in Q2, thinking, hey, how do I make sure that I'm building this sustainable or resilient procurement process? I'm attracting new talent. What are some recommendations you would give that organization?
I think simplifying processes is the first thing. You need to uh, allocate your time to the right activities, I would say. I think process is important, but you can predefine it, let the system take care of it. What you need to take ownership of things that are a little unknown and being discovered.
Mm-hmm,
When we talk about sustainability, in-country value, investing into resources for economic acceleration locally, have product services travel less because they release less carbon or that is more carbon efficient. Uh, Taking ownership of the subject is very important. What we
mm-hmm,
can't do is leave it for the next party to do that. And I've seen sustainability communication go unnoticed. There is non-responsive around it, non-responsiveness around it.
mm-hmm,
I think when I say take ownership, I have asked my categories, my core team, you need to
mm-hmm,
do workshops with your top vendors. Get them all in the room. There's no problem in having competition sitting together, but they
mm-hmm,
need to hear this word. What is going to be your mission, vision, objective over the next 5 years? Because the direct way to tell them where are we heading is when they actually hear it from you, not just read an email, because there are many newsletters that they kind of go through all year from other customers as well. But are they seriously investing into those infrastructure areas which would need to be sustainable? So I think 2025 is all about enjoy taking the ownership of difficult subjects because you go back to where your strength lies,
mm-hmm,
holistic side of things. You're the only one as procurement professional talking to external stakeholders, talking to internal stakeholders. People by the ethical side of things from the business unit side are not allowed to speak to vendors on commercials, right? So
mm-hmm,
we've got this right. Let's take ownership of things, drive things from a strategy perspective to a point where when you come back with what's on the table for you, you're able to leverage that knowledge, intelligence, and go back to your business and tell them, seems like we're heading into this direction. What can you do on your side of the scope, which
mm-hmm,
can inherently become sustainable? Because I've got some areas to plug, but I think it's like there is no win-win at the end. Generally, every person wants to win more
mm-hmm,
in a negotiation, but I think this is the time where communication alone is not helping. So it's
mm-hmm,
communicate and collaborate needs ownership, leaving the comfort zone, stepping out, meeting people, getting them together, and
mm-hmm,
actually working towards one objective. Because
mm-hmm,
there is no vendor that sits outside your bloodstream anymore. They're
mm-hmm,
not vendors that you tendered out five, one out of five, four are left behind. It's all about
mm-hmm.
finding the right partner for the right journey.
Yeah, I think that's so, so important. The right partner for the right journey. And I'm like over here scribbling all of your amazing nuggets, which you said in the first time that we met, you had said that your network is your net worth. And I loved that one. But there's no issue with competition sitting together in one room. I think that's so, so healthy. And when we start to put guardrails around those types of relationships, is when we're hiding things from each other. They become less transparent and they become less collaborative. And I love that idea of looking at your holistic business and the holistic procurement process and seeing where are these opportunities to become more efficient, to become more innovative, and to utilize technology to an extent, right? To utilize technology as the tool that it is, not as a main strategic approach, but to enable and empower our procurement team is so, so critical. So procurement can be one of those things that's a little bit siloed. So I wondered if you could give our audience some resources that you do continued learning around procurement, or that you find great articles or anything like that. And then I can link to them here in the show notes just so that we can give some additional resources.
I think SIPS is a study center is a great domain which keeps updating the content that goes there,
Mhm.
especially that they account for a lot of industries, and they've got a big student database as well. I've seen ProcureScape as well.
Mhm.
Some of their articles are very relevant to the modern day industry challenges. Um, you spoke about one very critical word, which was transparency. And I always say bad news is good news. At least you can do something about it. In supply
Yes.
chains, it is so complex at times that if one element of the chain is hiding or not being very inclusive in terms of the information sharing, I think the entire chain can fall. How do you build that transparency and trust is where you strategically get aligned with who
Mhm.
all are there. There's no harm in telling the customer your stuff is coming 2 weeks late. But
Mhm.
you can probably ask them what's the next best thing we can do for you, rather than
Exactly.
hiding it and then breaking that bad news at the end. So I think the understanding comes from if you talk about sources of information, it's all about professional collaboration and network.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm here because I wanted to be here. Because there would be things that you would ask me that those things will make me think differently.
Mhm.
I cannot be an expert in this space because it evolves so much that I need to remain a
Mhm.
student. I need to remain a student to make sure I'm actually grabbing onto anything and everything that comes around in this space because this would help me somewhere. I always say this is like you're you being or you're being drafted into an airline as a pilot,
Mhm.
and you rack up your flying hours, and while you're flying across certain routes, there is a turbulence factor in certain routes at certain points, and
Mhm.
your flying experience allows you to better deal with that turbulence. Now, flying hours versus number of transactions, the diversity of transactions,
Mhm.
different things, different timelines, different challenges, different priorities allow you to become a better professional. I mean, your practice around decisions, learning from them, being proud of certain decisions, how you could actually align, balance out things with the right balance between cost, time, and quality. That
Mhm.
makes you a better pilot, I would say. So that's your procurement guideline, and that is always a thing to accept that I will never stop learning. I would be on any forum that spreads knowledge because industry knowledge and
Mhm.
an easy thing without even going into domains and links and
Mhm.
academia would be any vendor that reaches you out. 95% of the people don't want to meet people when they're not on tender.
Yeah.
I have never refused a supplier meeting, and I'll tell you why. They leave industry knowledge, they leave competition knowledge as well. And there's no
Mhm.
harm in asking them questions. They
Mhm.
bring industry expertise. I cannot have expertise in every category. So they leave
Mhm.
that R&D side of their business. They will leave what's my competition doing because I might be pitching
Mhm.
for certain jobs there. And there's always something that they leave for you to hold on to. There might be another very similar tender happening, and that sort of
Mhm.
knowledge about a wider client can still be your preparation for your negotiations.
Mhm.
Procurement, spending money, you need to be very well prepared
Mhm.
because decisions in a rush, there will be decisions taken in a rush, but that
Mhm.
rationale you follow is your experience and
Mhm.
companies trusting your experience. So you need to continue growing around fashion, around your network, leaning on to those strengths of people who have been in a certain field, in a
Mhm.
certain category, meeting those old contacts from the vendor side, because all that adds up to your knowledge bank.
Absolutely. And I think, that's exactly why I wanted to have you on this episode, because of your willingness to be curious in your field. And I think that is so healthy. A lot of times, especially in something like procurement, we can get laser focused. I see this a lot in accounting, in manufacturing. We can get laser focused on what we have to do next instead of continuing to think, how can I learn from the community around me, the global community around me, whether it be that meeting, with a vendor or a supplier, and you're able to look at it and saying, what can I learn? Not, oh my gosh, I have to do this. This is, a forced interaction type of thing. And that's, such a healthy outlook. And that's why procurement is such a cool industry, because you do have that diversity that you can do as far as continued learning. So I want to be mindful of your time here. I know, we had some technical difficulties, which, we're transformative, we're curious, we totally overcame in this conversation, but this is bite-sized. So I always give our guests at the end an opportunity to give a bite-sized piece of advice. It can be personal, it can be professional, it can be whatever you want it to be, but kind of your main thesis that you'd like people to walk away with today.
I think it's not about buying, it's about bridging. And when it's bridging, you're actually connecting perspectives to make sure that it is very inclusive and collaborative. If we can get the right spirit around it, how many of us would walk to people and talk about a subject and come back and make them feel important, setting egos aside? That's where bridging would definitely add value to the entire process that you follow.
Mhm.
Uh, you need to become popular. You need to become very likable when you're a commercial person. You need to show you can't be an expert in everything, but you need to show an understanding level which makes people open up, and you can lean on to that knowledge to make sure that you take the right decisions. So it's not just buying, it's bridging. And
I
bridging
love that.
is a very interesting part of our business.
Yes, that is so amazing. Thank you so much for that piece of advice. So if our audience wants to connect with you, they want to find you, they want to ask follow-up questions, how can they get in touch?
My LinkedIn is available. I've left an email ID there as well. There's generally any query coming through from the other network side that I follow. I generally respond within 24 to 48 hours.
Mhm.
It's also interesting for me to see what sort of perspective comes across to me for my views. Best
Mhm.
part is procurement has no rights and wrong. So I can
Absolutely.
basically give an advice or a perspective about anything that I've seen. And one thing they all can be sure of, it would be something I've seen, I've done, might not be the best thing, but that's something that has been done before,
Mhm.
executed, came out
Mhm.
with some reasonable, satisfactory results. So yeah, I continue to do that, and I would always be there in case there is any professional help needed.
Yeah, your network is your net worth. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So definitely recommend to follow. I'll put some of your articles that I actually found you through that I thought were, very, very well done below as well. So we can kind of get to know your process and your thought leadership better. But we're so grateful for your time today. So thank you so much for joining us. This was such an awesome conversation with the audience. We're very grateful for your time today as well. So if you do have any questions, you can go ahead and drop them in the comments, as I mentioned, wherever you're joining today, whether it's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, all of our different outlets today, and we can go ahead and get those answered for you. If you do have any other interest in subscribing to our episode, you can get it in wherever you get your podcast. We also have a video podcast on our YouTube channel at The Confluential, which features all of our amazing bite-sized guests, and definitely recommend checking that out. We also are usually live every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern time here in the United States. And we're very excited to welcome some other guests actually on a special Friday that's an international banking episode. So definitely a good finance packed week, right? We've got banking, we've got procurement, some amazing guests ahead. So I am Kyler Cheatham, your host. I'm very grateful for all of your time today. If you have any feedback, I always love to hear from our audience. The goal is to make it as valuable as possible. You can email me directly at kyler@theconfluential.com or go ahead and message me on LinkedIn. I too try and get back to everyone within 24 hours, although I don't know if I'm as good as you are at that. So thank you again so much for your time today and
Been a
sharing all
pleasure.
of your insights. Thank you to the audience, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and goodbye to all. And looking forward to anything that comes across to me. I will make sure I beat Kyler on that on a 24-hour deadline.
Awesome.